These are my 5 best horror and sci-fi reads of 2023. Okay, I really don't even know why I did that, but welcome back to the channel. These are my top 5 horror and sci-fi reads of 2023. These are the best books I read all year long in the genre of sci-fi and horror. I say that because I have 2 other books I'm going to start the video with, honorable mentions, that were amazing books, but they don't fit into genre fiction, which is the vast majority of what I read. But these first 2 are literary achievements, and I just wanted to geek out about them for a minute because they were so brilliant. The first one is Confederacy of Dunces. This won the Pulitzer. This is John Kennedy Toole. This is the only book he wrote, I believe, that got published. And it was published posthumously. He unalived himself. Is that what I'm supposed to say? I don't know if that's the proper terminology, but he was so despondent that this book didn't get published that he succumbed to those feelings and his other mental health struggles, and he did not live to see this book eventually get published. His mom pushed the book through, got somebody to recognize its brilliance, and then it went on to win the Pulitzer. So huge, horrible tragedy for the author. Ironically, the book is about a guy and his dysfunctional relationship with his mother. So that's a weird little twist. The book follows Ignatius Riley as he wreaks havoc across New Orleans in many different ways. And it highlights the failure of institutions, and particularly higher ed and law enforcement and the family unit. It's a brilliant book. I can't really describe it. I'm sorry, I just got to step in here for a minute. I'm editing the video, and I cannot stand watching me stammer and stumble through my review of A Confederacy of Dunces. Yes, it's a hard book to describe because ultimately it's a book about nothing, in the same way that Seinfeld was a TV show about nothing. But in that nothing is everything. This is a book about stereotypes, about people, about the way they talk, the way they behave, the way it plays into certain preconceived notions, and the way it dispels certain things. It's a takedown of American society in a nutshell. You will hate Ignatius Riley, but you will be impressed by his greasy mind and the way he talks around everyone. I mean, he's an educated fool, and in a lot of ways, he's an imbecile. But he talks around people in such a way that they're the real fools. But the book does take on class, race, American society, and structure. And it's something, if you're an American and you're in this American family, you should find yourself in this book. You should recognize the things that have taken root since it was written, and perhaps where we're going, because the joke's on us. And even as I'm filming this interruption to my video, I realize I'm not adding a whole lot to the description of the book other than more praise. I'm just going to let this stand for now. If you've read it, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read it, maybe you're curious to discover more. It's not a book for everyone. If you're looking for a thriller where somebody's defusing a bomb with only minutes left until everyone dies, this is definitely not it. But if you're looking for a book that makes you think about the human condition, in particular the American condition, check out Confederacy of Dunces. I'll kick it back to Jeff. It is one book I read this year, recommended to me by a number of friends, including one Philip Fracassi. So I had to read it, and then I did. And it is amazing. Confederacy of Dunces. Brilliant book. The other book I read this year, which was an incredible top read, but it didn't fit into horror sci-fi, was The Painted Bird. Although, I guess it would be horror. This is about a lone 6-year-old, 7-year-old wandering through World War II Europe, going from village to village, house to house, family to family, and just trying to survive on his own. Really brutal things this kid witnesses. So this is in the vein of Butcher Boy and The Road and other bleak literary works. This book gets panned for being nonfiction because they say this is fiction. The author did not live these tales. This is not autobiography by any means. He took a lot of creative license with his stories. I didn't read it as a piece of nonfiction. I read it as a snapshot into what humans will do when they're allowed to do whatever they want and their baser instincts went out. And law is suspended, civilization suspended during wartime. And so what do they do to each other that pretty much create hell on earth? So brilliant book. And again, this was recommended to me by a number of people, including one Chad Lutsky. And just like Philip Fracassi, when Chad Lutsky tells you to read a book, you read it. I mentioned those two authors because they're on my list. Let's get into my list of the top 5. In no particular order. I did not put these in any order. There's just, these are my top 5. But among the 5, they're all 5. They're all number 1. All 5 of them are number 1 reads. Just read the damn books. First up is my first read by one Tyler Jones. This is Midas. Earthlings. Yes, it's a Halloween book. I have to check because no matter what Earthling does, they're great. But the Halloween series, this was number 18, is a great way to get introduced to new authors doing stellar works. Previously, Goblin by Josh Malerman was on that. Boys in the Valley. They Say a Girl Died Here Once. And Midas. So I read an advance copy of this book. Absolutely loved it. This is a story about a preacher who loses his son and basically loses his faith and how he struggles with that. And then one day he happens upon this map that takes him on a path that he it's one of those where he keeps going down this path. He keeps going further and further into areas where man should not tread. And the readers, myself included, was sitting there going, no, stop, just don't go any further. And he keeps going and going and going. And ultimately, it puts him on a collision course with a cult leader who's looking for the same things that this fallen preacher is looking for. And intermixed in all of this is grief, loss, and what humans will do to repair themselves, the great lengths they will go through in dealing with grief and loss and trying to make themselves whole again. Brilliant, horrific, heartbreaking book, Midas. I'm thrilled to have the hardcover. It is a beautiful book. This is Earthling again. If you don't subscribe to Earthling, you're missing out on some tremendous titles. This is illustrated, and it is signed by Tyler Jones and Josh Malerman. Who did the illustration? I think Vincent Chong. Yes, Vincent Chong did the illustrations. Beautiful stuff and a really incredible story. So definitely you should go get yourself Midas. You should also read other Tyler Jones works. Since I've read Midas, I've read Heavy Oceans and another title which will be released by Earthling as well, Night of the Long Knives. That is a great story as well. Tyler Jones is now a must-read author for me. Great stuff. So go check out anything from Tyler Jones. He just came out with Heavy Oceans. That was also awesome. Shorter work than this and Night of the Long Knives, but it goes deep. Next is Queen of Bedlam by Robert McCammon. I read this book 20 years after reading the one that preceded it in the Matthew Corbett series, Speaks the Nightbird. This is number 2 in the Matthew Corbett series, which is now like 9 books deep. And this was incredible. This is set in like 1702, New York, a town of just 5,000 people. And Matthew Corbett is on the trail of a serial killer called the Masker. He's trying to figure out who's murdering these peeps in his little town, because murder was just like invented the year before. So Matthew Corbett has to invent the detective to go find this murderer. This is a book I kept rushing back to because it's what you want in a book. It's total escape. When you read this book, you are back in New York in 1702, and you're really smelling the smells and feeling the energy of a town, a seedling of a town that would go on to become America's largest city. And I think Robert McCammon you could tell he has total joy for being in this space. And I'm excited to get to the rest of this series, but this was better, even better than Speaks the Nightbird, which was tremendous. After this is Mr. Slaughter, and I'm just dying to read it. Like, this is not a story or a series you want to end. I could see binging on all of those titles the same way others may binge on a Netflix series, but I would rather binge on books. If you haven't read Robert McCammon, you must. And if you love Robert McCammon, you must read Matthew Corbett. The third book, in no particular order, is Winterset Hollow by Jonathan Edward Durham. I love this book because I am a fan of books, and this book is about fans of books deepening their love for a story that brought them all together, going to visit the author's home on an island to soak in the vibes, if you will, a pilgrimage of fans to see the mansion where the book was written. And it's a trap. I'm sorry. That's all I'm going to say. It is a trap. This book is equally magical as it is dark, exciting, engrossing. You're never off the hook. It just rolls. This book just rolls. But it has that magical quality. If you've ever loved a book, if you've ever been charmed by a fairy tale, you know exactly what the main characters are chasing. You just want to hold on to that ember of childhood magic and keep it burning for as long as possible and have an enjoyable day with your friends. But what happens when that magic is constructed on cursed earth? Lots of twists and turns in this book. Very satisfying story. Lots of whimsy and daring do. This is going to be a Suntop edition very soon. It was already announced. I think it's completely sold out. I missed out on it. That is a whole other story. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I interviewed Jonathan Edward Durham on my channel. I don't know if you saw that interview. That's not why this book is in my top 5. This book would have been in my top 5 whether I interviewed him or not. So don't think I'm favoring anybody. It was a great interview. He's got a great story, but this became a Suntop edition. I will not be getting it, so I'm not going to be able to show it to you. I'm just wallowing right now in my sorrow because it looks like it's going to be a stellar book. So I'm here for whatever this guy writes, though. It's another one that I have to read. The fourth book on this list is How the Skin Sheds by Chad Lutzke. Oof! This is like Joe Lansdale meets Jack Ketchum and Chad Lutzke. Chad wrote it. It's very original. Splatter Western about a guy who's going off to avenge his sister with her traumatized daughter and the help of a friend. They're going off to find out who is doing the barbarity, and they're going to try to be barbarous on this barbarian. And it's a very slender book, but so what? It doesn't let up. This thing is pretty amazing. In fact, somehow Chad Lutzke works humor into this book as well. So, excellent story. I think this may be my favorite book by Chad Lutzke. I am currently reading Spinal Remains, and those are some brilliant stories. But this really was like incredible. And I've read by him Skullface Boy, of Foster Homes and Flies, Cannibal Creator, Slow Burn on Riverside. But this tops them all. This is really good. Definitely you got to read Chad Lutzke. I mean, this goes without saying. Like Tyler Jones, Robert McCammon, Jonathan Edward Durham, Chad Lutzke. These are all must-read authors. And the last book on my top 5 is also a must-read author. And that is Philip Fracassi. Now, I am showing you a book you can never read, or at least not with this title. This is Observed, but the book is going to be published as The Third Rule of Time Travel. And this is an amazing book. This is science fiction, and I don't think I've ever been as creeped out or chilled by a science fiction book as I have with Observe. I like to tell people that Observe gets everything right that Dark Matter or 11/22/63 missed. Those were great books. 11/22/63 and Dark Matter by Blake Crouch were great books, but they just missed a couple of things. For example, Dark Matter missed on the character development. They just didn't go, they weren't as nuanced, they weren't as complex, they were archetypal. Heroic man going after his prize wife sort of deal. And Blake Crouch admittedly writes the characters secondary to the device of the plot. So that's understandable. 11/22/63 doesn't have the focus that this book has. I think it has a flabby middle, kind of gets lost in there. And I know that's an unpopular opinion. I don't give a shit. But anyway, Observe or The Third Rule of Time Travel is superior to both those books because it has everything. It has the great, thought-out, thorough plot device. I mean, when you talk about time travel, it's easy to fall into many pits, but I think Philip Fracassi found a way to control that device to make the story make sense, where you're not sitting there going, wait a second, well, why wouldn't this have happened if this didn't go down that way? Brilliant way to control that device. And like Midas, this book shows what grief can do to a person. What if somebody who's grieving has the ability to remedy that, or to try to remedy that, toying with things that are perhaps beyond human comprehension or control, just to find a way to cope or get back to what was lost. I mean, that driver of human nature makes somebody desperate and risk everything. So this is a thriller, but it's super dark. A couple of scenes in here really sends chills, man. I and like I said, in a way that I think Blake Crouch's story doesn't. Blake Crouch writes techno thrillers, and they're very cool. They're very cool. If you've not read Blake Crouch, you should. You must. But I'm not really scared. This had a cutting edge to it. So when this book comes out as The Third Rule of Time Travel, I think it's not going to be out for a while. And this would not be in my top 5 if this book wasn't going to see a trade release, because why would I talk about a book that nobody will ever be able to read? But since there are plans in the works for this book to be published in 2025, I think I want to get you guys ready for it. And so you could say, well, back in 2023, the Jeff Word gave this a 5-star review. So those are my top 5 books of 2023. The best 5 I've read in the sci-fi horror category that I would recommend to each and every one of you. And I know a lot of you have read those. And in the case of Third Rule of Time Travel, you're going to have to wait a little while. But that's where I'm leaving 2023. Those are some good vibes. And maybe in 2024, I will finish Dune. Yeah, I've been reading that book for a long time now. I don't think you're going to find it on any of my top reads of 24, though, unless I don't read any other books, which would be sad. Let's not hope for that outcome. So thank you for joining me this time. I hope to see you again next time. And in the meantime, stay frosty.